HOA Karen complained about my trash cans. Now she has a lien on her house. If you've never lived in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, HOA, let me explain. It's like paying money for the privilege of being policed by your nosiest neighbors. Imagine a mix of middle school hall monitors and mall cops, but with actual power to fine you for leaving your trash bin out too long. That's my life. My wife and I bought our little slice of suburbia 3 years ago. On paper, it was perfect. Tree-lined streets, decent schools, neighbors who waved when you drove by. The houses looked like they were plucked from a Live, Laugh, Love Pinterest board. Vinyl siding, neatly trimmed lawns, and the occasional decorative gnome. What the realtor didn't emphasize enough was the HOA. At first it seemed harmless. Monthly fees weren't outrageous. We had a community pool, a park, and even some neighborhood events. Think BBQs with too much potato salad. The rules looked annoying but manageable. Mow your lawn, don't paint your house neon green, keep your Christmas lights down by mid-January. Fine. Then I met her. I'll call her Karen because, well, she earned it. Karen lived 2 houses down, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She had the kind of energy that screamed, "I've never been wrong in my life." Short blonde bob, always clutching a Starbucks cup, and somehow always on her porch whenever anything happened. Kids playing too loudly? Karen saw it. Dog barking? Karen documented it. Someone left their recycling bin an extra hour? Karen had already emailed the HOA before the bin lid even closed. It didn't take long before I realized Karen was the type of neighbor who weaponized the HOA like it was her personal army. The first complaint came about a month after we moved in. I got a crisp white envelope in the mail, stamped with the HOA logo. Inside was a formal letter informing me that I had committed a violation, leaving my trash can out past the designated 12-hour window. I blinked at it. My trash can. A plastic bin sitting at the curb for maybe an extra half day because I worked late. That was enough to trigger an official letter threatening a fine. I later found out how they knew. Karen had taken a picture and submitted it to the HOA board. Strike 1. A few weeks later, another letter. This time, my grass was overgrown. Mind you, it was maybe half an inch longer than my neighbor's, and I had planned to mow that weekend. But no. Karen apparently had a ruler handy, because she reported me. I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just a stickler. Maybe she had too much free time. I didn't want to be the new guy stirring drama. But then came the third strike. It was December. We put up Christmas lights. Nothing crazy, just some icicle strands and a glowing reindeer in the yard. Festive, but tame. On January 10th, I came home to another HOA letter. Violation. Holiday decorations must be removed within 14 days after December 25th. Do the math. I was 4 days late. 4. Guess who submitted photos again? Yup. Karen. That was when I knew this wasn't random. This was targeted. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was looking for reasons to report me. Maybe she didn't like newcomers. Maybe she didn't like my dog barking occasionally. Or maybe she just needed a hobby besides sipping frappuccinos and ruining lives. Whatever the reason, one thing became clear. Karen had declared war. And if she wanted war, fine. Because I was about to become the petty Sherlock Holmes of our HOA. If the trash can and holiday lights were the warning shots, what came next was Karen loading the cannonballs. I swear this woman had binoculars glued to her face 247, waiting for me to mess up so she could sprint to her computer and fire off an HOA email like it was a 911 call. It started in spring. We decided to stain our backyard fence. Nothing wild, just a neutral cedar color, bought at Home Depot. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Unapproved modification. All exterior changes must be approved by HOA Architectural Committee. I nearly choked. A fence stain? Neutral brown? You'd think I had spray painted it with neon zebra stripes. I called the HOA office, annoyed. The woman on the phone sighed and said, "Yeah, we received a report with photos. It happens." Guess who? Next came the basketball hoop. My nephew visited for the weekend, so I set up a portable hoop in the driveway. By Monday, another letter. Unauthorized sports equipment left in view of the street. It hadn't even been there 48 hours. 2 days. I called the HOA president directly, asking, "Do you people camp outside my house or what?" He chuckled awkwardly and said, "We only act on complaints from residents." Translation: Karen was at it again. Then came the noise violation. Apparently, my dog barking for 2 minutes when the mailman arrived was a disturbance. I laughed out loud when I read it. The HOA fine print said, "Persistent nuisance." 2 minutes? Really? By now it was obvious. Karen had made me her full-time project. One night I saw her outside, phone in hand, snapping a picture of my recycling bin because, gasp, the lid wasn't fully shut. I lost it. I didn't confront her directly, because, let's face it, that would have just given her ammo. But I went back inside, sat down at my laptop, and pulled up the HOA bylaws. And as I scrolled through the endless legalese about lawn height and mailbox colors, a thought hit me. If Karen wants to play this game, fine. But I'm going to learn the rulebook better than she ever has. And I'm going to flip it back on her. From that moment, I started watching Karen. Not in a creepy way, just in the same way she watched me. I made mental notes every time I walked past her house. The longer I looked, the more I noticed. Her backyard shed, unapproved structure, her flower bed border, wrong material according to Section 7. 3. Her RV parked in the driveway, against community guidelines, which specifically said no recreational vehicles visible from the street. Oh, and the kicker. She was renting out her basement on Airbnb, which was explicitly prohibited. I realized she wasn't just a hypocrite. She was a walking, talking violation factory. And that's when I decided, if Karen wanted war, I was bringing artillery. Because I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore. I was going to bury her under her own HOA's rulebook. There comes a point in every civil war where the initial skirmishes give way to full campaigns. Karen crossed that line for me the day she filed a complaint about my daughter's birthday balloons. Yes, you read that correctly. Balloons. It was a Saturday afternoon. We'd thrown a little backyard party for my niece. Cheap pizzas, a blow-up pool, 20 kids shrieking with the kind of joy that makes your ears ring for days. I'd tied a small cluster of balloons to the patio table, red and blue, nothing over the top. They bobbed in the breeze like cheerful punctuation marks. By the time the last kid was sent home and I was putting the pizza boxes in the recycle bin, there it was, an HOA notice taped to my door, formal and smug as a parking ticket. Violation. Decorative items attached to front-facing structures obstructing community aesthetic. I stared at the paper, then at the patio. The balloons had been in the backyard, not even visible from the street unless you had binoculars and a vendetta. I called the HOA. "Seriously?" I asked. "Balloons? We only enforce based on complaints," the woman said, almost apologetic. "We received a submission with photos." Guess who? That was unequivocally the last balloon. I'd reached my limit. I could have marched over and screamed at her. I could have plastered passive-aggressive post-its on her mailbox about her life choices. Tempting, honestly. Instead, I did the only thing that would work in HOA land. Paperwork. If the HOA bureaucracy was her weapon, I was going to become an arms dealer. I decided to document everything, meticulously, clinically, like a detective who had accidentally become a suburban vigilante. I started with the obvious, photos. Every day I walked my dog past her house and took note of visible issues. The RV that was legally supposed to be hidden, the shed that never had a permit, the cement pavers she'd installed without approval. I printed dates and timestamps. I took wide shots and close-ups. I logged license plate numbers when a different car stayed parked at her house for more than a day. I also dug into the HOA records. Meetings, minutes, past violations. I learned the procedure for filing an official complaint. There's a form and everything. I learned what constituted a material violation versus a cosmetic concern. And most importantly, I learned how the Architectural Control Committee, ACC, actually processed grievances. Spoiler, they loved a paper trail. You'd be surprised how many neighbors silently hate the local busybody. It turns out, telling someone you plan to quietly retaliate triggers a surprising amount of civic courage. Mrs. Diaz across the street told me Karen had been slamming her about a crooked mailbox for a year. Yet Mrs. Diaz's mailbox was an actual tribute to asymmetry. She happily sent me a set of photos with timestamps. The elderly couple 2 doors down, lifelong homeowners who'd seen 50 HOAs come and go, told me they'd been too tired to fight, but that Karen had complained about their laundry line last summer. They gave me permission to file the complaint on their behalf. My neighbor Tom, who works nights and often leaves his car on the street, confessed Karen had reported him twice for unauthorized on-street parking. He was thrilled to be part of this quietly righteous crusade. It turns out, while Karen trumpet-blasted compliance, people were quietly simmering. Once someone started mapping grievances, it became easier for others to say, "Yes, me too." I started slow and methodical. The first official complaint I filed on behalf of the elderly couple was about the garden border in Karen's front yard. According to Section 9(2) of the bylaws, certain materials required prior ACC approval. Her border used unauthorized recycled bricks. Quaint, but against the rules. I attached photos, dates, and a note from the elderly couple authorizing me to file on their behalf. A week later, the HOA sent her a notice asking for clarification and proof of architectural approval. She had 2 weeks to respond. I slept weird that week, like a kid the night before a snow day. Not because I was anxious, because the realization hit me that all that time Karen had been weaponizing anonymity, and I'd just turned the spotlight back on her. Once the HOA asked Karen for documentation, I kept going. I filed complaints for the RV parked in her driveway, with several photos of the vehicle visible from the street at odd hours. The unpermitted shed, and the Airbnb listing I'd found after noticing a steady rotation of different cars with out-of-state plates. Filing allegations is easy. Back them up? That's where the fun begins. I included time-stamped photos, notes from neighbors who were willing to sign a statement, screenshots of her Airbnb listing, public info, but it drove the point home. Copies of the bylaw sections she'd violated, highlighted like evidence in a courtroom drama. I did not gloat. I did not knock on her door. I kept a poker face. Part of the beauty of HOA revenge is that it's bureaucratic, and therefore civil. The HOA loved documentation. I gave them gallons of it. Predictably, when the first letter arrived at Karen's mailbox, she was outraged. She called into the HOA meeting, voice high and dramatic, accusing someone of harassment. She even hinted I was new and troublemaking. The board, politely quasi-neutral, reminded everyone the process required verified submissions and that violations must be reviewed. Behind the scenes, however, people were whispering. Who was filing against Karen? The RV? The Airbnb? The unpermitted additions? That's not the kind of scrutiny she normally received. People started paying attention. And attention is a merciless microscope in small neighborhoods. If you've never seen a petty tyrant start to lose her grip, let me tell you, it's better than Netflix. Karen, who had ruled the cul-de-sac with her clipboard energy, was suddenly on the defensive, and she was not handling it well. The first official violation letter to Karen came about 3 weeks after I filed my initial complaints. It was thick, stapled, and written in that bland bureaucratic tone that masks venom under politeness. Please provide documentation of HOA Architectural Committee approval for the following modifications. They listed her flower bed border, the shed, and the RV. They gave her 30 days to comply or face escalating fines. The RV one really stung. She and her husband used it for weekend trips. The bylaws clearly prohibited RVs visible from the street for more than 72 hours. I had 3 weeks of photos showing it parked in her driveway. Ironclad. Word spread. Neighbors started whispering on their lawns, pausing a little longer when walking their dogs past Karen's place. The HOA board, usually slow and disinterested, actually took notice, because my submissions were that well documented. Karen, sensing the shift, began walking the street more often, glaring at everyone like she was in a lineup and trying to guess who the traitor was. Spoiler, it was all of us. She doubled down on reporting me. I got another notice. Unapproved yard ornament. It was a birdbath. A literal birdbath from Lowe's. Another. Possible unapproved exterior light fixture. It was the same porch light that came with the house when I bought it. The HOA sent inspectors. Both times they shrugged. Looks fine to us. Her complaints were getting dismissed because she was suddenly under scrutiny herself. It was delicious. The real nuke came when I submitted proof of her Airbnb side hustle. The bylaws explicitly banned short-term rentals, no exceptions. I had screenshots of her listing, plus timestamps of random cars coming and going from her driveway at 11 p.m. on Tuesdays. The HOA board actually held a special meeting to discuss it. Karen showed up, red-faced, insisting it was family friends visiting. The board, however, had her actual Airbnb profile projected on a screen. Entire basement unit, sleeps 2, no pets. The room went silent. She sputtered. She denied. She claimed someone had stolen her photos. But the listing had her exact address, right down to the mailbox number. There was no escape hatch. The HOA issued her a formal cease and desist order and a $1,000 fine on the spot. That night, Karen was pacing on her porch, phone in hand, making angry calls loud enough for the block to hear. This is harassment. I'll find out who's doing this. I know it's that new guy. I was inside, sipping tea, watching Friday, the cat, play with a piece of string. My wife caught my grin and said, "You're enjoying this way too much." She wasn't wrong. A week later, her RV disappeared. The shed? She tried to slap a coat of paint on it to make it look newly approved. The flower bed border? Gone overnight, but the fines kept coming. The HOA was on her like hawks now, combing through every inch of her property, because the illusion of her perfection was broken. Karen had built her power on the assumption that she was untouchable. But once the board realized she was one of the biggest violators in the neighborhood, she was radioactive. Here's the kicker. The same neighbor who once reported me for balloons now had a literal lien threat on her house if she didn't pay up. Thousands in fines were racking up. Every letter she used to weaponize against us? Now those same envelopes arrived in her mailbox, thick and ominous. And every time, I caught a glimpse of her face when she opened them. The smugness drained, replaced with the look of someone realizing they weren't the sheriff anymore. They were the outlaw. The first sign of her desperation came in the form of an email she blasted to the entire neighborhood mailing list. The subject line was, "Harassment and unfair targeting." It was a 3-paragraph rant about how certain residents were conspiring to ruin her reputation by filing false complaints. She threatened legal action. She claimed she had friends in high places. She even accused the HOA board of bias, which, to be honest, might have been true, but only because they'd finally seen she wasn't the golden child she pretended to be. The best part? She copied the HOA president on it. And his reply, also visible to all, was a perfectly dry. All complaints are processed based on documented evidence. Please provide requested documentation within the required time frames. Translation. Sit down, Karen. For years, people had tiptoed around Karen. She was loud, relentless, and seemed to have the board's ear. But once the board started cracking down on her, it was like a dam burst. Mrs. Diaz filed a formal complaint about Karen's dog constantly digging under her fence. Tom reported her for leaving her trash can out for 3 days after collection. Oh, the irony. The elderly couple filed their own grievance about her decorative solar lights being unapproved. It was a feeding frenzy. Everyone who had ever been on the receiving end of her clipboard energy piled on. Within 2 months, Karen had racked up fines totaling nearly $4,000. The Airbnb violation alone was $1,000, plus $100 per day it remained online until she took it down. She had to repaint her shed, remove her flower border, and pay storage fees to move her RV off-site. When she tried to argue at the monthly HOA meeting, the board members just pointed to the stack of evidence. Photos, screenshots, neighbors' signed statements. Every time she opened her mouth, another binder came out. At one point, she shouted, "This is a witch hunt." And the HOA president, bless his deadpan delivery, replied, "Then stop lighting the torches yourself." The woman who once strutted the block, Starbucks cup in hand, now skulked to her car with sunglasses on, avoiding eye contact. People stopped waving at her. Kids whispered about her being in trouble. She'd gone from HOA Queen Bee to the cautionary tale of the neighborhood. Even Carol from 2 streets over, every neighborhood has a Carol, told me in passing. Well, I guess someone finally gave her a taste of her own medicine. I just smiled. Of course, Karen didn't go quietly. Her final move was to call for a special vote to remove the HOA board president, claiming corruption. She canvassed door to door, trying to get signatures. Nobody signed. In fact, the only thing that campaign accomplished was more neighbors whispering to me about how karma finally caught up with her. By the next quarterly meeting, Karen had lost every ounce of credibility she'd spent years manufacturing. And here's the cherry on top. Because she couldn't afford to pay all her fines at once, the HOA put a lien on her house until the balance was cleared. This is the same woman who once lectured me about how rules are rules when I left my trash can out overnight. Rules are rules, Karen. These days, I walk my dog without worrying about a letter showing up in my mailbox the next morning. My lawn can be half an inch too long without triggering a tribunal. My daughter can have balloons at her party without photographic evidence being emailed to the board. Karen? She still lives there, but quieter now. Her porch is empty most of the time. Her RV is gone, the shed looks bland, and her flower beds are barren. It's like watching a once bossy hall monitor finally get grounded for life. Before, every walk down the street felt like living under a microscope. Karen would be on her porch, sipping Starbucks, eyes darting between trash bins, lawns, and mailboxes like she was head of suburban TSA. People whispered about avoiding her, but no one dared openly push back. After her fines stacked up, the street felt different. Kids played basketball in the driveway without fear of a complaint. Neighbors left their trash cans out overnight without rushing to haul them in at 6 a.m. The collective tension snapped like an overstretched rubber band. It was the first time the neighborhood felt like, well, a neighborhood instead of a dictatorship. One Saturday, while I was trimming hedges, Tom, night shift car guy, came over with a six-pack. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Dude, you're a legend. You took Karen down." Legend? Me? I wasn't Batman. I was just a guy with a camera roll full of timestamps. Then Mrs. Diaz brought over cookies and thanked me for restoring peace. The elderly couple 2 doors down waved from their porch with unusual enthusiasm. Even Carol from 2 streets over gave me a thumbs up one morning, whispering, "Good riddance." It was surreal. I hadn't fought a dragon. I'd just read the HOA rulebook better than the dragon did. Karen didn't disappear completely. She still lived there, but she walked around with her shoulders slumped, sunglasses on even on cloudy days. The aura of authority was gone. Instead of strutting, she scurried. Instead of lecturing, she muttered. Her porch became a ghost zone. No more endless hours of surveillance. I half expected her to move, but I think the fines and the lien kept her tethered. She was trapped in the kingdom she used to rule, reduced to a cautionary tale. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up out of curiosity. The president caught my eye, gave me the faintest nod, and said nothing. But the look said it all. "We know. And thanks." Karen tried to speak again, claiming she was being harassed, but the board cut her off with a procedural reminder. All residents are expected to comply equally with the bylaws. Hearing her own favorite phrase turned back on her was poetic justice in stereo. It's funny how small things feel liberating after you've been under siege. I left my trash can out for 2 days once. Nothing happened. I let my grass grow a little too long during a busy work week. No envelope arrived. I even left the basketball hoop in the driveway for a whole week during summer. The kids loved it. Silence from the HOA. Every time I got away with something that had once earned me a letter, I smiled. Apparently, my little crusade became lore. At barbecues, neighbors would ask, "So how did you do it? What was the secret?" I'd shrug. Just followed the rules. But the truth was deeper. Karen had weaponized the system without realizing the system had teeth on both ends. Once I turned her own weapon against her, she had no defense. Months later, life settled. Karen was still around, quieter, paler. The rest of us lived easier, free from her clipboard tyranny. My wife and I laughed sometimes at the absurdity of it all. "All that over trash cans and balloons," she'd say. But it wasn't just trash cans, it was control. And once the control broke, the whole illusion of Karen's power shattered. When I tell people this story now, usually over beers or at a barbecue, I always get the same reaction. Wide eyes, followed by laughter, followed by someone muttering, "God, I hate HOAs." And honestly, same. But for me, this whole mess changed how I look at suburban life. After Karen's collapse, the neighborhood started to breathe again. It's hard to describe unless you've lived somewhere where one person made everyone else feel like they were under constant surveillance. Imagine having a hall monitor live next door, forever blowing a whistle at the slightest infraction. That's what Karen had been. But now? People relaxed. Trash cans lingered on curbs without fear. Kids chalked the sidewalks without whispers of unsanctioned markings. Neighbors left seasonal decorations up a little longer without panic checking their mailboxes for violation notices. It was as if someone had cut invisible strings we'd all been walking around with. I never set out to be the folk hero of our HOA, but that's what happened. One by one, people came up to me with conspiratorial smiles. "Thanks for standing up to her. You saved us all, man. Seriously, you're a legend." Even the HOA president, a guy so dry he made saltines look spicy, gave me that subtle nod at the next board meeting. It was the HOA equivalent of a standing ovation. It felt strange. I wasn't some brave knight charging into battle. I was a nerd who read the rule book and filed forms. But in suburbia, that was apparently enough to make me the Batman of our block. Karen didn't move away, which was honestly the biggest surprise. I thought for sure she'd sell her house out of shame. But she stayed, though she became a shadow of her former self. Her porch, once a command post, sat empty most days. No more long hours of surveillance. No more coincidentally watering her plants while side-eyeing everyone else's yards. She still walks her dog sometimes, but she does it fast, sunglasses on, head down. The aura of control is gone. Now she looks like someone doing penance, walking through the very neighborhood she used to rule. And when she does speak, it's in clipped, quiet words. No more booming, "you should" lectures, just mumbled hellos. The HOA board, invigorated by catching a big fish, suddenly got stricter, but in a good way. They started enforcing rules evenly instead of selectively. For once, the same people who used to swoop down on small infractions were forced to acknowledge the glaring ones. Ironically, Karen's downfall made the HOA better. Nobody wanted to be accused of favoritism again. So things got fairer, clearer, and less petty. Here's the part I didn't expect. The neighborhood actually grew closer because of all this. Tom started hosting driveway beers on Fridays, a casual hangout that wouldn't have flown back when Karen was documenting every parked car. Mrs. Diaz began tending her flowers without worrying about violations, and she always waves now when she sees me. The elderly couple, 2 doors down, they bring me zucchini bread from their garden. The unspoken thank you gift for, as they put it, ending the nonsense. We even joke about it sometimes. If someone leaves their trash can out too long, someone else will laugh and say, "Careful, Karen's watching." Everyone cracks up, even though we know Karen probably hears it from inside her house. Looking back, the biggest lesson wasn't about Karen. It was about how easily a community can fall under the thumb of one loud, obsessive person. Everyone knew she was petty. Everyone hated the constant nitpicking. But nobody wanted to poke the bear. It only took one person documenting, filing, and standing up for the whole facade to collapse. And that made me think about life in general. How many times do we just accept annoying, unfair situations because it feels easier than pushing back? How often do we give power to people who don't deserve it, just because they're the loudest? I didn't think of myself as brave, but I realized, sometimes, the quiet act of calling out hypocrisy is enough. Even months later, my favorite little victory still makes me grin. Every year, Karen used to host a compliance walk, where she'd strut around, clipboard in hand, and remind people about bylaws. This past year, the HOA canceled it entirely. No walk, no clipboard, no Karen strut. Instead, they hosted a summer block party, bounce house, BBQ, live music. Kids ran wild, adults drank beer, and people decorated their yards however they wanted. It felt symbolic. We traded surveillance for celebration. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if Karen even realizes what she lost. Not just money from the fines or credibility with the board, but the sense of control she used to live for. She had power, in her own small way, and she abused it so badly that everyone turned on her. Now she's just another neighbor. Quiet, forgettable. Which for someone like her, might be worse than any fine. So yeah, if there's a takeaway, it's this. Don't weaponize rules you can't live up to yourself. Don't underestimate the quiet people. And if you're going to play HOA cop, maybe don't have an illegal Airbnb running out of your basement. Because eventually, someone will notice. And eventually, someone will have receipts. And when that happens, it doesn't take yelling or drama or screaming matches in the driveway. It just takes paperwork,